So we survived 2020, but what's next? What's next? That's the question I've been getting a lot of recently. What is next? What should we prepare for? And it's kind of the same old thing, isn't it? Having a contingency plan, having what you need in case the supply chain runs out. To not be one of those people that panic and have no resources if things get tight, in the economy. If you lose your job, do you have a plan to deal with it? And we can go on and on. But 2021 doesn't look like it's going to be an easy year for a lot of people. Just because we're in a new year doesn't mean that everything is better and back to normal. It's not that way at all. In fact, it looks like because of the damage from 2020, 2021 might be that much more of a worse year than 2020. So I would brace yourself for the year that we're now in, because I think we're going to have a lot of volatility, a lot of hardship. There's going to be a lot of surprises ahead of us, not just because of the so-called virus that's mutated and doing all these things, but because of the politics. So we shall see. It's best to be as adaptable as possible and as prepared as possible. So for all those who say, what's next? I think it's just going to be a bunch more of what we've already been going through. And I think it's going to be a continuation, an evolution, if you will, of political and medical tyranny. That's how I would say it. Now, I do want to reflect back on 2020 for just a moment to give you some perspective. And to do that, I'm going to have to create a little contrast. And forgive me for the subject matter. It's a bit dark. I don't like to talk about these things, but I think it's necessary because this perspective is very important. You may have been told some of these things, but maybe you've not been told everything. So it's good to know the bigger picture. So we now have the global death numbers for 2020. I'm not going to go through every category. I just picked and highlighted a few so that you can have contrast between various categories. At this moment, it is believed that in 2020 globally, 1.7 million people died of HIV/AIDS. 1.8 million people died of COVID-19, directly or indirectly. 8.7 million people died of cancer. 13 million people died of disease of various types. And 42.6 million people died from abortions. Unbelievable. 42.6 million people died from abortions. Abortions account for more than 23 times the death than from COVID-19. Put that in perspective. There were more than 23 times more people died from abortions than COVID-19. I live in the United States of America. It's the third largest country in the world. We have, at best estimates at the moment of this video, about 331 million people. Okay. The CDC says that we have, for 2020, had about approximately 350,000 deaths from COVID-19. But in the small print, they do say that of that number, about half actually really didn't die of COVID-19, but they just had COVID-19 in their system upon death, or it was suspected that they had COVID-19 in their system. So if you really look at what we do know for a fact, that about half of the number, half of 350,000 people, most likely actually died of COVID-19, we'll come to the conclusion that here in the U.S. in 2020, the percent of the population who actually died of COVID-19 accounts for 1/20th of 1%. 1/20th of 1% of the population in the United States of America died in 2020 from COVID-19. That's not something that you're going to hear from a lot of people. And you're certainly not going to hear that from mainstream media. But the fear mongering is, in my opinion, part of the tyranny. So keep things in perspective. Keep things in perspective. Once you account for those who actually died of COVID-19 and not just had COVID-19 upon death, you will find that there are more people in the world that died from HIV/AIDS. There are more people who died of cancer. There are more people who died of just general diseases. And there are certainly a lot more people who died from abortions. So governments want to shut down whole nation states and basically kill their economies over something that is actually quite minuscule compared to other things. This is why I say this is a time period of political and medical tyranny. And it won't stop unless we actually stop it. So I hope everyone stays well. Thanks for your support. Catch you later.